equity, climate. And so I have come to realize the role that trees and urban trees and the urban forest um, plays and the way that interacts with all those things. So I'm really excited to be helping continue to weave the tree piece of this conversation into the awesome Main Street work. So I have a little slide deck. It's light on slide. I really, oops, let me try to share screen. It's not a slide deck heavy presentation. I mostly just want to chat and then save a lot of time for questions and conversation because I think that would probably be particularly valuable with this group. I want to hear what people are thinking about and wanting to know more about. But let me get my, oops, oops, mode. Okay. Oh, there we go. Okay, I'm having trouble figuring out how to get it to the right screen. Okay. Ah,
Well, Cassie is figuring out her technical issues. I'll just remind everyone, I'm not sure if anyone from this group was able to join last summer's street trees discussion, but we did have a part one where we talked more about the basics of the process of planting trees on main streets, the interaction with sidewalks, the selection of species, the things that the municipalities need to um, approve, those sorts of things. So um, anyone who didn't get a chance to check that out, it is posted on our website if you want to go back and look at it. And out of that conversation came the need or the desire to hear more about involving the community um, in um, in the process and of planting and maintenance. And so that was one reason, especially we were excited to hear from Providence Neighborhood Planting Program because that's um, their their expertise. So, all right, thank you, Cassie.
can you all see my full screen? You're seeing it in full screen? Okay, great. Um, so let's see. Who are we? PNPP, Providence Neighborhood Planting Program. We say PNPP because it's slightly less of a mouthful. We engage residents and community members to plant and steward trees in Providence. And we do that in very close partnership with the City of Providence and other organizations, residents, community members to to work towards a goal of having a city where everybody can have access to the benefits of a healthy, resilient urban forest, regardless of where in the city you live. Um, so I am not going to spend a lot of time on the why trees. I think this group probably already knows a fair amount about why we might value trees, just to highlight some of the issues. And I think in particular, I want to touch on the concept, which I think Jack mentioned also in the last tree presentation that you all heard through this program, but trees as critical community infrastructure. So trees, I think we often on the one hand are balancing how to not just have trees be a number or a dollar sign or they are living organisms, and the urban forest is a network that we work to have a sort of reciprocal relationship with. But also they provide these very quantifiable benefits to us, quantifiable in dollars, in stormwater captured, in test scores. Kids who can see trees out the window when they're taking tests score markedly better. All sorts of health, mental health, um, environmental, climate, infrastructure benefits. And I just really want to quickly mention this concept. I know we are talking about street trees specifically, and this is a Main Street focus, but I think it's important to always ground And you talk about trees and street trees in cities in just this framework of the urban forest. It's a term we use that helps us. We're sort of jumping back and forth often in our work between the scale of the tree in front of your house and how you or I can take care of that and learn about it and plant one if you don't have one, and that granular personal relationship, and then the sort of zooming out, remembering that these trees are part of this network. They operate together. They are provide more benefits, do more for us, and for our climate and our earth when they are um, allowed to kind of grow and connect as a system. So when we say urban forest, we really just mean all of the trees in an urban area. So that's all. It's the weed tree growing up in the lot, through the chain link fence, the volunteer. It's the magnificent, Betsy Williams sycamore in Roger Williams Park. It's the tree in your yard. It's all the trees in Newton Hill. All of that together we call the urban forest. So just want to share that framework before we zoom back in. Um, and of course, we can't talk about trees in cities without just acknowledging the sort of underlying premise that trees, like many other environmental benefits, are not equitably distributed around our city. So this is just a little snapshot that shows both. You can see that top left image, the dark green is where we have more trees. The lighter areas are where we have fewer trees at a sort of granular level. This is from LiDAR satellite data in 2018. And then when you look at other sort of demographic health issues, you can see that a pattern starts to emerge in these maps. It's where we see the highest heat island effect impacts, or where we have the fewest trees. Most communities of color, it ties to histories of redlining. There's whole, we're not going to go into the weeds of all of that, but that's an important framework for this work, I think, always. So PNPP has been around for almost, what year is it? 35, 6 years more. And was founded in 1989 by Peggy Sharp in honor of her mother-in-law, Mary Elizabeth Sharp, because she and some other sort of neighbors and her husband Hank were realizing that there were the city, like many cities around the country, was losing its street trees. The inventory, the kind of just number of trees was declining, and there was they weren't being replaced. And so her premise, which is wildly ahead of its time, I think, in this space, was to engage from the get-go the city in partnering and committing to putting cash on the barrelhead to plant trees in Providence. So she said if she raised money, um, pitched in money from the Sharp family, raised money, and started an endowment at the Rhode Island Foundation specifically to plant street trees with the agreement that the city would match for every tree that PNPP, that the endowment funded, the city would pay half the cost or one for one, and that they would collaboratively do this work. So from the beginning, from 1989, there has been this embedded partnership with the city, and then residents and community members of Providence. That was the other piece of this, was from the jump. And I think many tree planting programs and urban forestry organizations over the last sort of 10, 15 years around the country have really come to realize, oh, the sow and go model of you come in and you plant trees and, oh, this area needs trees, even if it's well intentioned to address tree inequity, you come and you plant trees by contract or whatever and you leave, doesn't work. It doesn't, the trees don't last. There's study data shows that actually the mortality rate of those trees it's not a way to effectively increase canopy, even if it is a way to spend a lot of money planting trees. But so this, to their credit, the kind of understanding from the beginning that this idea of getting community members involved in the planting program was key. I'll talk more about that in a moment, about some of the mechanics of that, but just to zoom out again about what we do. So PNPP's core focus is this neighborhood street tree planting model, but we also do a lot of community-based tree maintenance, stewardship, we like to call it. The idea of stewarding something as opposed to just maintaining it is a more sort of active and reciprocal relationship. And community-based training and education of either sort of the general public, residents, individuals, or through partnerships. We work very, very closely. Again, this was sort of embedded from PNPP's inception, but we've really just maintained it as the core way we do anything and are able to do as much as we do with our sort of lean, mean, tight capacity is by working in partnership with other groups. So we do trainings with, there's lots of amazing organizations who do jobs training or youth education around environmental issues. We don't kind of recreate, we don't do those ourselves. We partner and do trainings with a lot of those organizations and bring the tree frame and the tree lens. And then increasingly working on urban forest, just kind of hub synergy making, network building. PNPP has always sort of been a de facto kind of the urban forestry tree organization in Providence because there wasn't, even if we've never really owned that or resourced that or, we're growing into that, but that role. And part of that was our kind of acting as a lead partner in this very collaborative multi-stakeholder development of the PVD tree plan, which is worth checking out and looking into if you haven't already. But pvdtreeplan.org. But that is kind of one area where we are also acting as a sort of trying to pull all the policy partner collaborative threads together for urban forestry in Providence. But back to, let's see, our core planting program model. I think it is, again, as I touched on, well, so the basic way it works is that you want a tree in front of your house, say. You live in Providence. We are currently in our core programs tied to and limited to the municipal boundary because we do everything through this partnership with the city and we're sort of embedded with the city forestry division in Providence. We're incredibly lucky. I mean, we're also the largest city, so it's necessary, but we have a forestry division embedded in the Parks Department. It's under-resourced and not enough capacity or funding, but it exists and has existed. PNPP and Peggy Sharp and others had helped to advocate to create it, years ago, and now we have that resource. We have a shared office space with them. We sort of are joined at the hip with the city forestry organization. So if you want a tree on your street, you would reach out to PNPP and say, oh, how do I get a tree? And we'd say, oh, do you want to act as a tree leader and organize a few of your neighbors who might also want a tree? And you find a minimum of 4 other properties nearby who want a tree. You help kind of sign them up. And the premise is that you get a free tree. The city and PNPP come and mark everything out. We'll depave if a new pit is needed. We replace the old compacted soil and add new soil. We do all the, dig safe, all the technical stuff is done. You commit to come out and help on these community planting days. This happens every spring and fall, usually on Saturdays in October and April. You help plant the trees in these lovely community planting days, and then you are agreeing to water and care for the tree for its first 2 years of life. So that's super amazing model for getting buy-in and support and getting trees where people want them. These people act as the tree leaders and sort of organically over time. Someone often does one planting and then maybe they plant on their block and then they say, ooh, we need trees down there. And they kind of organize one down there. And there are people who've been acting as PNPP tree leaders for 35 years since the beginning and are now like the tree lady of, Marjorie Pounding is the tree lady of Fox Point, forever. They train up other tree leaders. So it's a great kind of organic model. It does, as you can maybe guess, have some barriers or limitations and certainly some kind of tree equity implications. It's a model that works a lot better in owner-occupied residential neighborhoods or in, if we're talking about commercial districts, places where there are street level, I mean, a main street, with a vibrant retail business district is actually an easier place to do that, where you have people who have a street level interest in um, in what's happening on the sidewalk in front of their street. But it is um, not always, it's not possible for everyone. If you are have a, you know, slumlord and you're going to be out in, a year maybe, why are you going to invest in caring for a tree? Or do you have access to a hose? Or do you have time to organize a planting? All of those considerations. Um, so one of the things we have done kind of over the years, oh, this is just some pictures to show also I'll touch on. If anyone is really interested in this street tree issue and um, wasn't able to attend the groundworks, Jack and Jim, is it from Central Falls, who led the part one of this? I recommend going back and listening to it because it's just we worked very closely with groundwork. A lot of what Jack talks about in terms of the sort of technical process about fitting trees in to the city is just what we do. We do it with them in Providence, and it's a great summary of some of the more granular issues about fitting trees in and soil volume. But this is just a great picture that speaks to one of the realities that it's hard to fit trees into cities. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of wires. This picture up on the top left shows, wow, how could you ever fit a tree in there? No one has. There's probably a reason that street is empty. Um, but so to get back to the kind of maintenance and care piece and what it takes and the sort of barriers to getting trees established. I think increasingly people are really understanding and grasping and realizing that it's not enough to plant a tree and walk away. We often say when you plant a tree in the city, that is the very beginning of the relationship and the work and the cost of adding canopy to that spot or creating getting to an endpoint of a mature shade tree that is doing all of that heavy lifting of, shade and stormwater and all of that. So budgeting for that, planning for that, the cost is almost as much. Literally, when we're like at this point, when I'm doing grant budgets, it's almost uh, equal cost that I need to, estimate for keeping that tree alive through that establishment period. So um, there are a lot of ways we have come to, and this slide is just touching on some of one of our community tree keeper programs. Let's see, it's just about young structural pruning. But the ways that I think there's a number of ways that getting at this maintenance care, establishment care piece can work, and we've been problem solving it over the last few years by either using sort of approaches that are community-based tree care and maintenance, but are not relying on an individual business owner or resident to come and water the tree themselves every week, 15 to 20 gallons a week for 2, 3, ideally more years. That's a lot. That's a lot of labor. That's a commitment. That's a real effort. So we have been developing programs like with Groundwork. We a bunch of years back started the youth bike watering program. So their youth um, jobs training summer program work with us. We provide technical support. They water trees at like public, maybe along a commercial corridor or at a school or somewhere where there isn't a resident who's able to do it. Or with Garden Time, we have a sort of joint program with Garden Time works with formerly incarcerated folks on green jobs training after exiting the prison system, and we now have this kind of cohort of skilled tree maintenance crew who water, prune, care for, mulch, maintain young trees, and those are sort of models that can be They can be more, more affordable than just paying a landscaping contractor to do it. They also have multiple benefits. That's, there's education and training and workforce development and community engagement and buy-in. You're also getting trees watered. We also have, and I don't really have, so this is where my thin slide deck. Maybe I just stop sharing and that for a minute. Well, no, I want to show these quickly. Um, let me yeah, just talk for a moment about this Broad Street initiative, because I think this is something that is very relevant to the Main Street approach. So commercial districts have been for a long time an area and sort of commercial corridors where our planting model has to kind of is struggles or doesn't always in its like original form or intent work. It can work. Maybe you can get a couple business owners on a stretch to be excited to adopt their tree, but not everyone. It usually takes there has been a tree leader who's been working on Broad Street for years, just sort of going, Marilyn Cepeda goes up and down, knows all the business owners, harangues them, gets them to sign up, lovingly bullies them into agreeing to water a tree, comes by and says, "Are you watering it all the time?" That's a huge commitment on her and amount of labor on her part. But but it has led to kind of a pretty, more for an area like Broad Street. I think we have a better than expected tree canopy along that corridor, partly because of that. But still, there are just so many more pressures. First of all, that those street trees face physical pressures. So soil compaction is one of the biggest issues for street trees, for getting the trees to survive, for just mortality rates, for absorbing stormwater, for all of the things. And so things like that, things like just watering, vehicle damage, we have for a long time been trying to figure out what's the right model to fund and do that. And then something like Broad Street often crosses or doesn't go through the center of a ward, and we've sort of a political ward in Providence. That's our sort of geopolitical division, and we've learned that often those corridors get sort of short shrift because they aren't any one city councilor elected official's focus or territory. So we have, with some other groups, had some real, this is just in its infant stages, but I think is a very promising approach. And we hope to kind of, if this works well, pitch this in other parts of the city for these other sort of tricky commercial corridor areas. We have gotten a few city councilors, the three city councilors whose wards abut Broad Street, which, sorry, for those of you, I know people are coming from all over the state. Broad Street in Providence runs from throughout the length of the south side, from kind of near the highway 95 all the way down to Roger Williams Park in Cranston. And it has multiple kind of commercial clusters along it, a lot going on. It goes by the park. It's got just, it's a long and complex commercial area. So we have gotten all of those counselors to invest some ARPA funds that they had held over, federal funding, to put towards a collaborative kind of greening, beautifying, tree focused, but also it's going to have trash cans, trash pickup, hanging baskets, flower baskets, tree pit guards, planting and watering through these jobs training programs, outreach and engagement. And so I think those type of, and very specifically, we talked about not just having it be tree focused and not just trash cleanup focused, but all those things together. And we are trying to work on doing the outreach in a coordinated way. So instead of, convening a meeting just to talk about the trees on Broad Street with the business owners, we're going to talk about all the things and how could that fit together? And can the people cleaning up trash from the tree pits also be, remulching, or where do we most need tree pit guards? So that's an interesting model that we've been digging into. And I'm gonna stop. Let's see, what time are we at? Okay. Um, and really, I think um, maybe we could just spend the rest of our time with sort of questions and discussion we talked about. Really, does that
Yeah, can you talk for a minute about the
Mhm.
people part, about um a lot of questions came up in the last session, the part one, about, you know, like how to best engage community members. And so this is my first question I put in the chat, was like, so are your tree leaders all coming to you, or are you recruiting them in some ways, or do you have partners recruiting them specifically? And then, like, how do the leaders then, like, recruit others, and what have been successful ways of doing so? So
Yeah,
yeah.
I think that it used to be more of a they come to us. You kind of like, here's what we do, and you come find us. And there's plenty of people who are excited about trees in the city. And so we generally, PNPP has never had an issue with finding people who want to plant trees. Of course, that does then skew towards where, the same neighborhoods, the same places tend to, um, is where we tend to get that interest. What we have done in the last 5 or 6, 7, 8 years is really more intentionally do focused outreach and cultivation and engagement to pitch people on why they might want to get involved and be a tree leader. And oh, hey, first of all, this is a thing, that you can do. And second of all, here's how we can help you. And really, and this is where, this PNPP was always a like half-time, 20-hour a week, theoretically, position. And so we've sort of been growing, and we're in the process of kind of organizational change and growth and trying to build capacity and turn into the broader urban forestry nonprofit that Providence needs. But a part of that capacity building has been to do that work of supporting, it's more so keeping the balance of like that volunteer engagement and participation is crucial. We would never be able to do what we do without the sort of work and labor of those tree leaders and just of those to have people come out and plant. We plant 500 to 550 trees a year every year on average, every spring and fall. And just the work of getting those trees in the ground. And even if we are through grant funding and additional, business sponsorship or city councilors, putting in their little pots of money to pay for watering and care for some of it, still the vast majority of those trees are being cared for by volunteer labor. So that's huge, and is what makes it possible. I think, yeah, having a lot of technical support and, we'll go out with you and door knock or practice, going to businesses and asking them, and we'll model that for you and help you. And any type of material, we have spent a lot of time in recent years making just materials that are, common concerns and questions about trees. What are tree roots and sewers, sidewalk conflicts, infrastructure, how do we having responses for those, training tree leaders and volunteers in how to kind of speak to those and feel confident in being able to address some of those challenges. Um, I think that has been key. And then trying to also just build sort of community among those volunteers who are sort of leaders, uh, having a little symposium orientation session each season where new tree leaders, someone might have be doing it for the very first time. And then there are people who've done it for, 30 years or 10 years and have them all come together and we do a training and the pro seasoned tree leaders give tips to the new tree leaders um, and sort of mentor or build, sometimes they'll, connect and become kind of follow up offline. We also, I didn't mention this, but have been working to do a lot more community-based tree maintenance activities. So Tree LC, we have called them in the
Like that.
past.
Yeah.
So a Tree LC, that's a really we think of it almost like a flash mob, like we might pick a day, a spot, a stretch, this part of Westminster Street is desperately in need of, aerating. There's some just real basic and sort of compared to planting a tree, and all that goes into depaving and permitting and dig safe and excavation, caring for an existing tree pit is as important to sort of getting that final mature tree, but is a lot less, anyone can be shown how to do it in, 15 minutes and can then do some like really critical interventions. So having TLC days where people come and learn how to just do light aeration of a tree pit, remove, trash and kind of contaminated old mulch and put in new wood chips and or do some home, inexpensive tree pit protection. Doing that with volunteers and their community building and education, oh, where are you from? Oh, what neighborhood do you live in? Oh, why do we do this work? And then just work together. Those are really, I think, valuable, powerful, simple, kind of low input activities. Sorry, that was a long, rambling answer to that question.
That's okay. Well, I don't want to monopolize. So if anyone has questions, please, please, please use the raise hand feature and we can uh, uh, get everyone involved in the conversation. But I know one of the things we talked about were the specifics of planting on private property, because you were talking about the depaving and that to happen on sidewalks, which is the public right of way, but that there are also times when you can plant on private property. Can you talk about that part of it?
Yeah, so, and it's different in every municipality is going to have slightly different, who has jurisdiction over which. In Providence, the right of way is the city's responsibility and sort of jurisdiction for deciding what happens. And that's where we kind of through our program have um, another real advantage of the partnership with the city is that we have sort of embedded permitting, like we don't have to go through the DPW, Department of Public Works in Providence to permit each tree pit. It's all just sort of part of our forestry program. So that's sort of the core of our the vast majority of our planting sites. But whenever possible, we actually seek to and try to encourage residents or business owners or property owners to plant the tree on their property if because usually there's just more space. There's more, there's less going on if it's not, with ADA for all the reasons. Uh, there's often more space. It also, this can cut either way, but it puts the burden of care onto that property owner. The city, it's one less tree on the city's rolls, although we are always trying to fill up any possible publicly managed tree spot also at first, but it does mean that person is going to be taking care of it and managing its long-term health. Um, for better, for worse, they could also remove it if they want for no, unless it was a significant tree protected by ordinance. But yeah, that's, I think, necessary. And it depends, how, if you're in areas, municipalities, or parts of your community that are less dense and where there is room in yards, or that's almost always the best option for the tree's health.
Great. I see Scott has his hand raised.
Jillian. If there are anybody else has their hand raised, I don't want to. I will defer to them. Oh, like Rex just. Well,
Just ask your question. I think
okay,
it's
all right,
okay.
okay, all right, all right. So it's a two-part question. Excellent guidance for us. Thank you. Do you have advice for folks on the call or other folks in our orbit who may be interested in this? How they would start a community tree planting program if they don't already have one? Any basic advice on that?
Yeah, I think that finding the kind of core infrastructural needs are things like physical space to, I think, Groundwork talked about this in their presentation, but a physical space to store trees, somewhere to have them delivered to. That seems really simple, but like we have the forestry division, the yard, in Roger Williams Park where we can store the trees securely and know they're going to be, we have access to water. That's huge. And maybe access to trucks or equipment if there's a part of the city or if you could get a private entity or a, local business or something to donate that or whatever, but having a sort of knowing where your core infrastructure, space and equipment needs are going to be. And then I think I really do recommend the community-based. I mean, it's, anyone who's worked with volunteer-based or community programs knows that's work. It's not like that doesn't, um, people don't organize themselves, but I think that what you can do with, there's so much willingness and momentum and excitement and desire to engage and involve in this work that using a community volunteer-based model is worthwhile. I think sometimes it can be tempting to be like, that's too much, we could just hire or get this company or even get this like, you know, um, I don't know, get just this group of college students to come and do it once, and that's valuable. We love and rely on our wonderful local college students to help at lots of plantings, but I think it's worth doing it through a kind of resident and kind of stakeholder-based model.
And are there other communities in Rhode Island you're aware of, or maybe Jillian or others on the call are aware of that are smaller than, well, every community is smaller than Providence, but that are managing to make this happen? I
Yes,
think Newport has a program, but
Newport has a really robust, terrific program, and the Newport Tree Conservancy, similarly to PNPP, sort of acts as a nonprofit arm. There are folks in Cranston who have been working really hard recently to try to get some stuff off the ground and have been doing it in very sort of small and localized, kind of neighborhood specific ways. But who have been through a lot of volunteer labor and effort. I think there's some good resources right now through, well, it still exists, some of the federal funding that is still kind of trickling through the system for support from the Green Infrastructure Center, which is Molly Henry and AJ Elton, who was for a while the city forester in Providence. Are providing sort of technical resources they can be connected with through DEM, but I think that's another good resource that cities and
right.
towns can use, lean
Thank you
on.
very much. Thank you.
Mhm.
I'll let others
Yeah.
chime in. Thanks.
And I do know that the HES network has been working on a program, and I see Rex has their hand up. So, uh, Rex, you want to go next? Are you talking about the HES?
Sure. I'm pretty new to the East Providence says, and I'm only there temporarily. But one of the things that I've been hearing as a concern that residents have around planting trees on their property is the potential for damage or injury from the tree falling or branches falling, things like that. And I was wondering if you maybe have any idea of the likelihood of something like that happening, or just something to kind of ease their fears, maybe?
Yeah, I think that's a huge key point, even just broadly. I think I meant to mention this, so thank you for raising that. I think that one thing we are really intentional about, and I think this is critical kind of lens to bring to any tree planting work, is um, yes, trees are amazing. They're necessary. Nature's amazing, perfectly engineered, climate, environment, health devices. But acknowledging that trees can cause problems in cities. They can butt up against the other infrastructure we have, the other needs we have. There are legacies of poorly maintained trees or trees that were planted before we had the knowledge we have now. Urban forestry is a relatively new, field and practice. So just first of all, not, in Providence, we have crumbling clay sewer pipes, and the trees aren't causing the issues with the sewers, but roots are opportunistic and going to those holes and then getting in there, and that's not covered by your general homeowner, so damage from trees. I think just acknowledging those, we've done a huge amount of work through the PVD tree plan, again, through a lot of those outreach materials that kind of we use to address and speak to and really acknowledge what the risks are, and then honestly try to talk about the ways to mitigate those. I think for things like damage from trees on private property, a lot of that is trees that have not been kind of structurally pruned well from a young age. That was one of the reasons we created the Providence Community Treekeeper program, in 2016 modeled on other cities is if you can get in early and give those trees the structural pruning when they're young, you are saving, that tree is going to be more sound, healthier, live longer. It costs way less to do it now with a tree pruner, with a hand pruner, than it costs to get a crew with a bucket truck up. So I think care and maintenance when they're young. But then there's also a huge need for just sort of more resources for supporting tree maintenance on private property from like a need, that it's expensive. Anyone who's had tree work done knows, got your arborist bill. It's important, valuable work, but like figuring out ways and there are some groups trying to pilot some sliding scale, ways that can be invested in so that, you know, it isn't just here's the tree, good luck, hope everything goes well, but how can that be? And again, it's an ongoing relationship. It just starts on the day we plant the tree. It's just the beginning.
All right, I think Andy's hand was up next.
Afternoon, everybody. So I guess I'm a civil engineer with Fuss and O'Neill, and I wanted to provide some of our experience with tree filters for street trees in the right of way, specifically the Nightingale Apartments in Providence, near the Dunk. I know it's the AMP now, but still calling it the Dunk. And specifically on Mathewson Street, what we did there was we had roof runoff from the building directed to a header pipe and then distributed into Silvacell tree filters along that stretch of the street. So the trees are in the right of way, but they're treating private stormwater. But there's the mutual benefit for the private developer, they're able and more willing to have a wider sidewalk there because they didn't need to do the stormwater on their private property. And the city and the public and the property owner are getting better trees. They're noticeably growing quicker and doing better than even the other trees that we installed at the same time for the same project on Westminster and Fountain Street. And, part of the ongoing maintenance concerns that Cassie brought up with watering, damage to the sidewalk, aerating, are addressed, not completely removed, but definitely mitigated. So then, there's the more upfront cost, but I think developers are more open to take on that upfront cost if they're getting a better frontage for their building and their businesses. And if, the municipality is willing to kind of negotiate that. And then, there's obviously the maintenance agreement that needs to be ironed out between the municipality and the private property owner. But, the private property owner needs to do a maintenance agreement for, other permitting agencies anyways. So a lot of that is in place. And specifically for this one, we only designed them to receive roof runoff. So we're not getting that sediment load and debris that you'd get from catch basins directing into the tree filters. So we're mitigating how much maintenance the tree filters would need too. So, happy to kind of share that experience and hopefully, other, kind of not necessarily full public-private partnerships, but definitely kind of during the planning process and TRC meetings, love to have more people have those conversations.
I need to go and take a closer look at those. I know of those, but I would love to go and look at those. I'm going to put a link in the chat to, as part of the PVD tree plan process, a bunch of partners, planning, forestry, others, PNPP created this sidewalk tree infrastructure conflict toolkit, and then which has a bunch of sort of the common issues and other technologies and approaches and interventions that can help. And certainly one, this is like a preventative one, which Andy was speaking to, but things like silva cells or structural soils or other, interventions we can put in. We have some piloting of some permavoid, which is just a different system along those lines that we're going to test at a bunch of different sites around Providence. I think it is, yeah, it's higher upfront cost, but the more we're trying to sort of pitch and pilot and make the case for why it's worth investing in now for all sorts of down the road. But I love the idea of that being part of the conversation with the developers from the jump for any new development is that's
Yeah, I
might leave
love
that.
that too. I love that way of thinking about
Yeah.
multiple things at once. And feels like we need a field trip. Go see it. Carlo had his hand up and then Maureen, we'll get you next.
Thank you. Carla Berger, Town of Barrington. I had a question about renter-owner dynamics in commercial districts. We have a nascent town community planting partnership, and we're about to do some outreach on one of our main streets, Maple Street, which is an Eat Island. And it's a daunting challenge because there's a lot of renters. And so I had a question about, are there, reaching out to the owners, is that something that the renter should be doing, the town, the community group, or what is the best strategy for landing the deal?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think so. First of all, it depends on who. I don't know, in Barrington, is it the town has jurisdiction kind of over the sidewalk officially?
Yeah, we have in the right of way, but we are empowered. We got some funding to do work on the setback as well. So it depends obviously on the
Yeah.
property, but it's tight on that
Yeah.
street.
So, and it doesn't necessarily matter. I think what we've learned is that even when, we plant trees, technically the city and PNPP through our partnership could come in and plant anywhere we want in the right of way, but we know that the trees won't survive if someone doesn't want them there. So our main goal is don't plant trees where someone actively doesn't want one. Do everything we can to get the buy-in. But if someone really doesn't want one, that tree's not going to make it. It is going to get hit by a car or, whatever is going to happen to it, girdled, intentionally yanked out. So, but I think what we do, the way we think about it is we want somebody to have a stake in it and be aware of, have some level of buy-in and know that, and want the tree. And then on a right of way, this is talking about, and then making sure that there's no one who actively doesn't want it. So what that looks like for us is if there's nobody, if we can't get a tenant or a renter, the, business tenant, or the owner to plant the tree, usually we will skip that unless we think, well, sort of it's a judgment call. We might be like, well, let's go ahead and plant it and see. But if there's a business owner who's like, yeah, that sounds great. I'm excited. I would love shade. I'm, not too worried about, whatever, it's going to block my sign or, and we have all sorts of pitches around, shopping. There's some good data around how trees benefit businesses. People spend more time at a store. They spend this much more money. All the reasons. But we will then send an opt-out letter, we call it, from the city forestry and PNPP saying basically, congratulations, you're getting a tree at this property you own. Often it's an out-of-state, property holding company or out-of-state landlord. Or it might be local, but saying if you have any, you're getting a tree, it's going to be done through this mechanism and this time of year. If you have any concerns, let us know. And it's sort of, we've given them a heads up. They can let us know. It gives us a chance to, like, anyone who calls us immediately is like, no way, then we can either try to work on them or we have run into things. We had on Broad Street this past spring where it was a perfect spot. There were no trees in this intersection, wide sidewalks, great spot. The business tenant was very excited and wanted it. The property owner, who didn't live locally, adamantly didn't want it and we tried to picture and it didn't work. And so we ended up voiding those sites and there are no trees on the intersection and it annoys me every time I go by, but
Thank you.
Awesome.
That's helpful.
All right, Maureen, you'll be our last question. Maureen Moakley, one of our wonderful and supportive board members. So
I hate this is just a detail. This system while you use the roof irrigation, particularly in urban areas, is like terrific idea. Has this caught on? Do people know about this?
Andy, do you know of other examples locally or?
I guess it's at the time when we did the Nightingale project, it was the first silver cells that were installed in the city of Providence. Since then, we've certainly used them for other developments, similar approach with just the roof runoff, a lot of affordable housing jobs. I guess we haven't done too many others with the same type of magnitude in an urban setting. But even if you're not able to tie in stormwater roof runoff, just collecting the surface runoff into those and then having the silver cell system is definitely worthwhile. So I'll follow up with you, Jillian, and then maybe we can organize that field trip and see if we can get some momentum going on that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, in my former life at the Children's Museum, we would do these rain barrel workshops to try to encourage the homeowners to install the rain barrels and then use the water for the there. So we're coming up on time at 1 o'clock. Does anyone have a last quick question for Cassie? Doesn't look like it. Well, so I'll just take this moment to say thank you again so much, Cassie, for joining us. It's really a model program that Providence has, and glad that we can collect information about it and share with make it available to everyone around the state to kind of think about how something like that could possibly work in their community, and also to think about the role that Main Street programs, as they hopefully become more prevalent in Rhode Island, could play in the tree canopies in those commercial districts, especially as you said, those ones that don't have anyone yet that's really owning it in that way. So that's fantastic. Thank you again, everyone, for joining us. I know August is a strange time, so especially thankful that you came out today. Make sure you're signed up for our newsletter to hear more information about our Main Street programs. We will be having a conference in October that will encourage everyone to attend or invite your friends. And yeah, to hear about it all, you can sign up for our newsletter on our website. So yeah, I'll stay on if anyone has any other questions. But it's 1 o'clock, so we'll turn off the recording and say thank you again to all, and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Feel free to reach out to PNPP if you're thinking about starting a program or have specific questions. You can reach out to us and we could set up a time to talk more at some point.
Thank you so much, Kathy.
That's a great offer. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you very much for the program.
Thank you all. Thanks so much.
All right.